Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll talk a lot about the New Orleans Saints. We'll touch on the New Orleans Pelicans, and we hope to get a chance to talk a little bit about college basketball as well. Got a great panel for you tonight. Lyons Yellin of WLAE.com and Brett Martel. He is the writer for the Associated Press. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us as always. Certainly appreciate you guys' time. And as always, we'd like to try to start the show, letting the folks know a little bit about what you guys are involved in. Brett, tell us a little bit about the AP.
Yeah, AP, worldwide news agency based in New York City. I'm kind of the Louisiana sports correspondent to the world, so I just try to cover all the major events from Saints and Pelicans to LSU football and basketball, the IndyCar race, and a couple weekends, and then the PGA tournament and all that stuff. So keeps me busy.
Going to be interesting to see how the PGA and the IndyCar racetrack kind of coexist, as they're not too far from each other. I wonder if there's going to be a moratorium on noise when the pros are out there, when the Zurich is on in a couple of weeks from now.
Well, I've played around at the TPC Louisiana before when they were doing some motorcycle testing over there, and it's kind of funny, you know. Lyons and I have worked in big stadiums full of screaming people riding, and so it doesn't really affect my backswing, but I kind of laughed, like when I was on the second or third tee taking a swing, and all of a sudden I heard an engine roaring and tires squealing.
Yeah, so, I don't know if that was the best place to put that. But if the golf course gets off the ground here in New Orleans, ultimately probably the Zurich will move across the river to the city. So we'll see what happens down the line. Lyons, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for being with us. Please tell us a little bit about what's going on at Channel 4 and your role there as well.
Yeah, I'm a sports reporter over there now, joined the television side of things, and now I anchor as one of the fill-in guys. We have a new anchor, Leslie Spoon. So. Yeah, just happy to be over there.
Well, thanks for being with us, guys. Let's kick it off. Again, 866-3200 is the phone number if you'd like to get involved in tonight's program. This is a live show tonight here on this Thursday night. First of all, guys, your overview on the offseason as a whole. It's been a lot of moving parts by the Saints. I think that one of the things that Sean Payton talked about this week and Mickey Loomis talked about this week at the owners' meeting was everything they've done to this point has been calculated. It's been a calculated situation on who they were going to move, what they were going to try to get for those players, and places where they thought on their team that they were able to move players to be able to help their defense. Brett, your thoughts?
I was a little surprised in that, you know, I was just basing it on history, and in 2008, you had an 8-8 team that had lost a bunch of close games, and you felt like they were almost there. If they just had a little bit better chemistry, made a few tweaks, they could be better. They thought they were going to be better, and in 2009, they won the Super Bowl. So at first, I was kind of thinking along those lines when they went 7-9 this past year and lost a bunch of close games. Maybe didn't need to make some wholesale changes. But I understand what they're doing. I mean, I think they surprised people with a lot of their moves. They decided where they had tradable assets, where they could get value in return to address what they perceived as their weaknesses. And I think that Sean Payton has a lot of confidence in his ability to adapt his offensive schemes and play calling to whoever he has. And he wanted to make sure that he's, I think, reallocating resources to deal with two things. And one was the offensive line, and especially the middle of the line, and the other is the defense.
Lyons, your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, we talked about it a number of times. They've been kicking the can down the road for a number of years in terms of the salary cap, and I think they did a really good job this year of kind of giving themselves some breathing room going into the future, while getting younger at the same time, and that's been a big issue for them over the last couple of years. So you've really seen them again shift some like Brett was saying, offensive assets to defense. They really needed to build that defense up, and things just didn't work last year. We never could quite put our finger on it throughout the season. Towards the end of the year, we started hearing about professionalism and guys needing to do their jobs, and there just wasn't something clicking. So I wasn't surprised that they decided to kind of not blow things up, but make some wholesale changes and bring in some more experienced veterans that have championship experience.
Right. You know, it's amazing, guys, as we sat here around this time last year, free agency ending, getting ready for the draft. And then, of course, after the draft, there were so many experts, especially those of us that are here in New Orleans, that either cover the team or, or talking about the team on a daily basis. This was a team that was primed for another Super Bowl run. Obviously, the expectations were there, but they didn't live up to those expectations. And now, they might say they're not blowing it up on Airline Drive, but again, even if they're going in there systematically and getting rid of different players, you got to at least say that at this point that they've identified what they believe are the players that don't fit their system, don't fit within the organization, and they're not hesitant at this point to move those guys out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Jimmy Graham move really said it all, and he was an extraordinarily productive and popular player. But I think what Sean did was say, the last time we won a Super Bowl was before he was here.
Yes.
And Sean doesn't want to be a coach. There are a lot of coaches in this league that have mediocre teams sprinkled with superstars. Mm-hmm. But the whole team doesn't work. You look at the Detroit Lions, have the best receiver in the game and have had the best receiver in the game and a pretty good quarterback for years.
Sure. And
they can't get past the first or second round of the playoffs and struggle to make the playoffs sometimes. And Sean doesn't want to be one of those coaches. And so he just, I think he just made a decision that as good as Jimmy Graham is, for what we're paying him and what we get, can we make do without and get stronger in other areas?
Right.
And those were just, that was his thinking, I believe.
Lyons?
Yeah, I thought that made perfect sense to get rid of Jimmy Graham, and you look at what they got in return to get Max Unger, to bring Max Unger in. He's half of what Jimmy Graham cost. He has a very simple contract for the next 2 years, about $5 million per season. Plus, you get a first-round draft pick this year, extremely valuable. And the way the Saints have accumulated draft picks this offseason is fantastic. You think about this is a team that had the least amount of draft picks over the last number of years, and now they have 9 in this year's draft. They're really going to have the ability to have some flexibility in this draft. If they want to move up, they can. If they want to stand pat, they can do that. But to have 5 picks in the first 80 is really going to help this team going forward. Now, of course, they have to hit, and you did see some shakeups in the front office this year, but I think that's a good thing for this team.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that happened at the owners' meeting. And one of the things that Peyton talked about at the owners' meeting this week was that he felt that he went and really kind of purged positions that where he had guys that ultimately the cupboard was not bare. That he felt like he had established players on this roster, that if he was to take players or move players for contract reasons or because they were tradable assets, that they had other players that could step in. Specifically, wide receiver, tight end, linebacker, and guard. Brett, do you buy into that? Are there wide receivers on this team that will be able to step in? Is Josh Hill going to be able to come in between Hill and Watson and be able to man that tight end position? Is Lito ready to play full-time guard? And then again, now they've moved Hawthorne to the middle. They bring in Ellerby. Are these two guys that again can maybe step up for the loss of a Lofton? Look, there are many reasons why. When you look at the salaries of some of these guys, they weren't playing up to what the salaries are at this point. There are a lot of reasons why the salaries are to this point. What's your thoughts?
Well, Josh Hill, I believe he had 5 touchdowns last year and was among the leaders very quietly in that category and had some long touchdown catches. And one of the things that makes him so dangerous is that he's not only an ascending player with measurables that the Saints coaching staff are crazy about, but he's still kind of an unknown quantity. You saw teams really scheming around Jimmy Graham defensively, right?
Yes, right.
The last few years, there was no secret.
Yeah.
Their priority was to shut him
Sure.
down. And that's not necessarily going to be the case with Josh Hill this year. This could be an interesting and very big year for him. And he also is arguably more of a complete tight end than Jimmy. He's not Jimmy Graham in terms of, height, speed, jumping ability, hands necessarily, but he's fairly close in those areas and then better probably in blocking and more versatile in terms of how good he's been in special teams and so forth like that. I suspect he'll play less special teams if he's going to have a greater role in the offense.
Yes.
But, so that could be. And then, they had some big receivers on the practice squad.
Coleman, Santavius Jones, Brandon Coleman, Santavius Jones, and of course, still waiting for Nick Toon to emerge as well.
Right. They must have some kind of sense of the potential they saw in those guys in practice, even if they didn't feel like they were quite ready for game action last season. But, you know, those are young players. Now, Toon maybe has been a little slower than people had hoped. But the other two guys, I believe, were rookies, right? And, and I mean, even Robert Meacham couldn't get on the field his rookie year and then became a contributor in the Super Bowl season. So I think, and those are big guys, and you know, if you're looking at big targets.
Well, Breeze loses a big target in Graham. Now all of a sudden he's got a couple big targets that kind of match Colston in terms of their height and of course their wingspan in terms of catching those balls. And Breeze has kind of leaned on some of these big targets over the last few years. When you look at it, always been a guy that liked to throw the ball high to Colston, but now with Jimmy Graham, again he did that. And of course that was one of the things I was thinking in the draft. They'd be looking for a big target, but you're right. Both of those guys are big targets.
Yeah, and maybe it's the geometry with the shorter the quarterback, and you can throw over the lineman, and the guy will still catch it.
Throw it high, no doubt. Lyons, what are your thoughts?
I mean, you could tell what the Saints thought about the two young receivers at the end of last season. They elevated them from the practice squad up to the roster in order to protect them. And with Santavius Jones and Coleman's a little bit bigger. He's 6'6". I mean, that guy looks the part when you see him in the locker room. He's an impressive figure, and I think both of them showed flashes in training camp. Obviously, they're young and needed some work, but I think you'll see Breeze have a lot more confidence in them this year. And in terms of Josh Hill, you know, I think he was impressive last year, but he did kind of sneak up on people, and it is going to be interesting to see once teams start game planning against him if he's able to do the same type of things. But I think with Lolito moving over to guard, I think they're very confident with him.
You think he's ready?
I do.
The coaching staff seems to think he's ready.
I wanted to see more of him at center last year, but left guard, I talked to him this week. Left guard is his natural position. He had 45 consecutive starts in college at that position. He came into the league thinking he would play left guard. And every time he's gotten the start for the Saints, they've actually won.
Yes, that's true.
They're 4-0 with him as the starters. Now, obviously, that's a small sample size, and we're going to see more of him. But I'm anxious to see what that line looks like with him in it. And having an experienced guy like Max Unger next to him is a good thing.
No, I'm with you. One thing that Peyton said this week, again, some of the guys they let go, Lofton, obviously high cap number, Grubbs, high cap number. Now, they were letting these guys go with still tread left on the tire. They still had something left in the tank going forward. Again, the Saints have they set themselves up for this in a lot of cases by borrowing from those particular salaries to be able to sign other players in hopes of trying to get to a Super Bowl. And then ultimately, again, even though those players are nice players at this point, they just, when you matched them up to what their salary was, obviously Saints couldn't afford them. And even across the board, they were not worth what they were going to get paid by the Saints.
No, they weren't. And sometimes you just have to purge your roster of those type of contracts. And you saw that's what the Saints did this year. And you look at a team like New England, that's kind of been their MO for years. They always get rid of players maybe a year, maybe 2 years before they probably should, or you know, they kind of have a drop-off. But I thought that was a good thing. It was very strategic. I thought the Saints acted with kind of surgeon-like precision.
I would agree.
This offseason, you know, it was really all the people they got rid of. They can overcome those losses. It's nothing too big to where you say, oh my gosh, how are they going to recover? How are they going to find somebody to replace those guys? So I really like what they've done all the way around. You bring in a guy like Brandon Browner, and you really set yourself up for a few years down the road. You got to eat some dead money this year, but going into next year, you're in pretty good shape.
Well, one thing that I thought immediately when all this stuff started happening was I remembered when Sean Payton talked about seeing himself as kind of a football CEO, and that if you look at, you know, the internet world or whatever, you know, people were copying Microsoft for a long time. He used to compare the Patriots to Microsoft. And when I saw these offseason moves, it's like I thought, you know, the Saints are looking a lot more like the Patriots right now, and maybe that's not a bad thing when you consider what the Patriots have done under Belichick, going to 6 Super Bowls and winning 4 since 2002.
Some have said that Breeze became too reliant on Jimmy Graham. It looks as though Sean Payton may be going again back to this original offense where you saw a guy like Breeze, you saw a guy like Sproles getting a lot of balls thrown their way. They were kind of the safety valve, but also a big part of this offense. Looks like C.J. Spiller's going to bring the same type of situation here.
Yeah, and you know, I think this is a interesting move and a savvy move by the Saints, particularly when you compare. I know that Reggie Bush was maybe a sentimental favorite, and Sean said during the owners' meetings that he did have, I think, lunch or dinner with Reggie in L.A., thinking that they weren't going to be able to get Spiller.
Right. Everybody kind of thought, maybe a cap-friendly deal, heavy on incentives, and Bush comes back, not a guy that wants to be the running back he wanted to be before, but understands his role and again, how Peyton will utilize his talents. But I'm with you, Brett. No, I didn't believe that C.J. Spiller could be on their radar simply because of what he would be commanding on the open market.
Yeah, and the thing is, he was hurt a lot of last year, but I think it's important to distinguish between injuries. And I think it's fair to say that the most valuable assets on a running back's body are below the waist, right? And I mean, good hands don't mean much if you can't move. And if breaking tackles meant that much, then they'd be handing off to fullbacks all the time. So C.J. Spiller's legs last year, while he was rehabbing his shoulder, were resting and not taking NFL punishment. So he's in the prime of his career. He's got rested legs. If he's fully healthy entering this season, he could be extremely dangerous, as good as he's ever been, and he's a very versatile player, and it could end up being a tremendous, on the order of the impact we saw Darren Sproles have for this offense.
They're definitely looking for that for sure. Lyons?
Watching Sean Payton gush over C.J. Spiller at the owners' meetings the other day, I mean, he kept going and going and just wanted to talk about what a weapon C.J. Spiller was. And I think you're going to see them move him around, use him in a lot of different ways. And what's different from the way they used him the last few years in Buffalo is he's not going to be asked to be that #1 back, a guy that's going to have to pick up those hard yards, in between the tackles. That's going to be Mark Ingram's job. And I think that should prove to keep him much healthier than he has been. And Sean is sitting there, in his office right now looking at film. He said the cut-ups of C.J. Spiller were just unbelievable. So I think this is a guy with the Saints that could just be an absolute home run for them for the next few years.
Lyons, I agree with you. As I mentioned before, I didn't think that they would be in the market for C.J. Spiller. I loved him at Buffalo. And if you get into a pinch down the stretch where a Kyrie Robinson or a Mark Ingram is nicked up, this is a guy you can hand the ball to, and you could keep him going in the running game.
He's a guy that's rushed for nearly 13. He has a 1,300-yard season. I mean, 1,700 yards from scrimmage. I mean, this guy is no slouch, 900 yards after that. So he can absolutely be that #1 back for the Saints if they need him to.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night right here on WLAE TV. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Our guest tonight, Lyons Yellin of WWLTV.com and Brett Martel, the Associated Press. 866-3200 is the phone number. We'll come back to the phone lines after our break. Again, each and every Thursday night right here on WLAE. Make sure you check out Inside New Orleans Sports. We'll be right back.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile. WLAE is currently looking for partners to underwrite this program and other programs on our station. Underwriting on WLAE is affordable, brings exposure to your cause or company, and helps support our nonprofit mission of providing television programs that educate, inform, and inspire the viewers of Greater New Orleans and Southeast Louisiana. If you are interested in learning about program underwriting on WLAE, please contact us at 504-830-3703. You're watching WLAE, New Orleans Public Television. Find us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Tonight, Brett Martel of the Associated Press and Lyons Yellin of WLAE is on our panel. Also, you can call in. You can be part of the discussion. 866-3200 is the phone number. Guys, one of the things that really kind of caught me by surprise this week was the fact that Peyton said that Cam Jordan, they're working on an extension for him now. There were rumors that were abounding, and as soon as free agency started, that Cam Jordan was on the trading block. So much so, there was one report that said that the Giants and the Saints were very, very close to making a deal. Jordan makes $6.9 million against the cap this year because they took this fifth-year option. Last year was not the best of years for Jordan. The Saints have been burned in the past by going out and maybe rewarding a player before their contract year. You know, you can look at the Junior Gillette situation as one that's just front and center. And I really thought they were going to try to let this kind of play out, and knowing that Junior was going to probably have the best year of his career because, hey, you're playing for that next contract. With that said, because they're up against the cap, they need the cap room. That $6.9 million is a huge number to carry for Jordan right now. It looks like they're going to try to work out a long-term extension. Lyons, I'll take you first on this. Good move, bad move for the Saints? Your thoughts?
You know, it depends on how things play out, because if you don't reward the player before his contract's up and he has a monster year, well, then you're going to end up paying more for him in the long run, and you're going to have to fight off other teams for him. So I see why they might want to do that, but I never thought that the Saints would try to bring him back after this year. I thought that they would probably move on from him. I just didn't see him as a fit here anymore. Well, he's a good player, but I just saw him as a guy that didn't seem into this area and maybe wanted to get back home. He just seemed a little detached in the locker room this year. So I was very surprised to hear that they're trying to work out a deal.
Brett, what's your thoughts?
Well, I thought he was good in 2013. Yeah, led the team in sacks that year, 12.5. And he had a down year, but sometimes players have down years. He's still pretty young. He was a first-round draft pick. They have a lot invested in him. So this one could have gone either way.
Right.
They had to make a decision, and they went for the known quantity instead of the unknown.
Mm-hmm. I like him as a player. I'm just a little hesitant. If I was in charge, if I was the king for a day, to give a player an extension when you know they're going to play well. And ultimately, you know, I think there's a lot of Cam Jordans out there, honestly. I mean, he hasn't been the greatest pass rusher in the world. He's a serviceable defensive end who had a great year a couple years ago. Can he string that into a couple seasons? Who knows? Maybe it's the scheme. Maybe it was what happened last year. I don't know. Maybe it was a little being upset with the Junior Gillette contract. There are a lot of things that we can talk about. But ultimately, again, it'll be interesting to see what that contract is if they ultimately work a deal out. Because if you're Cam, you got to be saying to yourself, wait a minute, why would I want to make a deal? I've got $7 million coming in the bank. I'm banking it this year. And then, you know what? I can have the best year of my career, and then I'm going to be one of the best defensive ends on the open market.
I mean, I always want a guy with a chip on his shoulder, and I wonder about Cam if he actually has that. And you look at the guys that the Saints have always had success with. It's the type of guy that maybe was overlooked and is maybe always out to prove something. And I just don't necessarily know if he's that type of player. And yeah, this is a contract year, and it might be that he has the best season of his career because of it. But then you wonder, if you do re-sign him, is he going to continue to have those type of years?
Brett, anything you can add?
Well, it's tricky because he is the son of a former pro football player,
Yes.
and therefore maybe wasn't as hungry as a child, or
Right.
you know, and so forth. But on the flip side, he should know how to be a pro. He probably got some advice from his father, and he's coming off a humbling season, and you know, he went to Cal Berkeley. I think he's generally got a good head on his shoulders. He is a tough guy to read because he's a private person, but you know, it's a tough.
It's a roll.
It can go either way.
It's a roll. It really is a roll of dice for him. And look, the main reason why they're doing this, in my opinion, is the cap.
Yeah.
I mean, they need that cap space. You know, again, after June 1st, there's going to be some veterans are going to be cut loose. Even before that, after teams draft, teams are going to figure out, you know what, I have a cheaper option than the guy that I have on the roster right now. And the Saints may be in line if they can open up some cap room to fill some holes with some veteran guys who may not be costing as much on the open market as some of the players that we've seen going in the first wave of free agency.
My first thought when I heard that they were negotiating with him was that if they can't get something worked out with Jari Evans to kind of lessen his cap hit, that was their move. Turn to Cam Jordan, try to extend him and lessen his cap hit this year. So that may be what they're doing, because I just don't see Jari wanting to renegotiate his contract.
That's a great segue, and you pretty much answered the question. That was one of the things that was talked about at the owners' meeting. You know, Peyton said that Jari's here, he's going to be here. And that they're working on something right now, but it's uncertain on whether they will get a deal done because, I mean, let's face it, Jari Evans looked at a bunch of teammates who did the same thing he did, gave the team money, basically moved his numbers around his contract to give them cap room, and then ultimately he sees those guys being cut, in some cases being picked up and having a chance to be able to get that other signing bonus, and it works out for the player, but in other cases, obviously you're uprooting your family, a lot of the things that go along with it.
Yeah, I think that players are willing to take a hometown discount to a point, but I don't think that Jari wants anything significant. So he may be willing to take like a 20%, but
right.
If they're asking him to get it down to 40-50% to lower the cap hit, that may be a tough sell for him.
Yeah, and I would agree, because one of the rumors that was out there, guys, that you guys know as well as I do, that Buffalo was waiting in the wings. If the Saints were to cut Jari Evans, that literally he had a suitor immediately in the Buffalo Bills, and you got to believe there would be other teams out there who have cap room who said, you know what, we can splurge for a couple years with Jari Evans, even if he's going to be a declining player. Let's head to the phone lines. 866-3200 is the phone number. Brett Martel, the Associated Press, Lyons, Yellin of WWL-TV are our guest. James is in Franklinton. James, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey guys, how you doing, Lyons, Brett, Ed?
Right.
Love your show. My question is, and more a statement than a question, can't we do any better than Junior Gillette and Cam Jordan for this year coming up? I mean, last year these guys were awful. I mean, that front line was like Swiss cheese, and I mean, they made Rob Ryan, who I guess he knows football, it made him look like he didn't know anything about football. But these guys weren't motivated. So now we go ahead, and according to Lyons, we take an unmotivated Cam Jordan. We give him an extension, for Christ's sake. All I want to say is, and I'm going to hang up, is and ask the question, can we please go ahead? Do you think that Peyton will go ahead, sign a contract, and then move Jordan, and then find somebody else on the open market that'll make an impact? I'm going to listen to you guys. I'm going to hang up and listen to you guys give the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, James. First of all, I don't think that'll happen. You sign him, you're setting this thing up so that you can amortize the signing bonus over the life of the deal. You're trying to get cap relief. If you trade him, all of a sudden all that signing bonus becomes due. So I don't think that's in the cards. But I think it's a legitimate point. Both these guys underachieved last year.
Yeah, one thing though you can look at is the extent to which the middle of the defensive line affects their ability to rush. And I think a lot of people thought that Akeem Hicks was going to have a better year than he had. Broderick Bunkley's a veteran. He's good in certain situations. But it seemed like the push in the middle wasn't nearly as good.
Hicks was not the same player last year. Neither was Jenkins.
And when the push in the middle isn't as good, then it's harder on the defensive ends.
Right.
So, I do think that part of the problem is that they weren't functioning well as a unit, and that affected the production of certain players, especially Cam Jordan. Now, Junior Gillette came on strong and still led the team in sacks. The knock on him is that sometimes he's a selfish pass rusher, and that he uses his athletic ability to try to, get in the backfield at the expense of losing gap control.
Yes, agree with that.
So, and I suspect that he's on a bit of a short leash, maybe double secret probation right now. But it looks like they're going to stick with it. And the thing is, both of these guys, I still think, have some of the raw tools that you need if the unit is functioning well to be effective.
Yeah. One thing Peyton did say was they're looking at least 2 defensive linemen in this upcoming draft. So they're not satisfied with the production of that defensive line.
And I also think that it's also going to help with now you bring in Brandon Browner, and I think that was a big part of the Saints' problem last year is they were having to play off coverage, and the pass rush would never really had time to get there. The quarterbacks were releasing the ball so quickly, and I think this year you're going to see, and they've already said this, you're going to see a lot more press man coverage. They're really going to try to get up on the line and disrupt the receivers. I wouldn't be surprised to see them draft another cornerback. They need a third cornerback, somebody that can actually play coverage in that slot. but I think that will make a big difference. Plus, I think Junior Galette is really going to be marginalized this year. He got the big contract last year, was elected captain, and I just don't see that this year. I don't think he'll be a captain.
I agree.
You know, like Brett said, he is going to be on some kind of probation, and he's probably facing some sort of a suspension.
More than likely 6 games from the NFL.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think he's really going to have, you know, to assess his career and say, look, all right, I've got to kind of grow up and mature. And that's what we saw from him last year, is a real lack of maturity. So I think that you might see a different Junior Galette this year and a different line. Look, all of these guys have something to prove this year.
Yeah,
big time.
I would agree. Back to the phone lines we go. Brian is in Metairie. Brian, thanks for calling Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hi, gentlemen. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
I just have a question, and we've probably beaten this horse to death. And I've been a Saints fan, and I understand business and salary caps. But it's hard for me as a Saints fan, and this is a problem I've had with Loomis and Peyton. I don't care if we got 50 draft choices. We don't do nothing with it. We had disassembled the number 3 offense last year for the sake of trying to upgrade. Well, now we're not going to be able to score points or stop people. At least we could score points and win some games. You've disassembled it. The defense was terrible. We all know that last year. I could have lined up a couple of Jesuit Blue Jays and the Holy Cross Tigers, and we'd have done better than what we had in the secondary. Okay, and they're addressing some of those problems. I understand you can only do so much. And, I mean, it's not just the Jimmy Graham thing either. Don't get me wrong. I understand salary caps and all that. But even about 40% of your offense, of 30%, how do you get rid of that big of a chunk for the sake of defense? And that's what it's all about. And then, we got Unger. Unger is a great center. We want a pass-oriented team. He is a run-oriented center, in my opinion. And we got everybody that's run-oriented. Because poor Drew Brees looked like Archie Manning running for his life last year. And, I mean, it's just my opinion. I don't understand how you disassemble the number 3 offense for the sake of it all.
Brian, thank you.
It's kind of like a addictive thing.
Thank you, Brian. Guys, they brought in C.J. Spiller, who again is going to take off some of the pressure off the loss of Jimmy Graham. They believe Josh Hill will emerge. They only had so many tradable assets on this team. That's what it came down to. There were only so many players that were attracted to other clubs.
Yeah, I think that to say they disassembled the number 3 offense is on one hand valid, but on the other hand, I think Sean tries to look at the type of offense he had when he won the Super Bowl and how balanced it was. And you know, it wasn't. They were 6th in the league in rushing that year. You know, 2011 was arguably the most prolific offense people had really ever seen in the NFL. I mean, it was good. I guess it was up there with the Patriots in 2007, or I think was the year that they almost went undefeated. Yeah. And Tom Brady set a record for touchdowns. But you know, he wants a team that's balanced enough to win all kinds of games in all kinds of situations. And you know, in the last 5 years, they've never made it. They missed the playoffs twice, and they've been unable to make it past the divisional round at all. Whereas in the first 4 years, they made it to the NFC Championship game twice and won a Super Bowl. So as good as the offense has been in the past 5 years, I think Sean just decided that he just needed to redistribute some things, and he's very confident in his ability, I think, to work with what he has as an offensive coach. Because one thing that has been constant during the entire Sean Payton era is that they've been basically a top 5 offensive team.
It is a valid criticism, though, when you look at the history of their drafts, and I've talked about it on this show, talked about it on my radio show. An average of 2 players per draft that make an impact on this team, with the exception of 06 and 13, where in 06 and 13 they drafted early. Now they've accumulated these picks. At the end of the day, they've got to hit on these picks, you know, because you are disassembling in some cases the offense. But I mean, a lot of it is motivation to be able to retool the defense, but also it's the cap. I mean, they are in dire straits and had to move some contracts. Lyons, what can you add?
I mean, and you also have to look, I agree with Brett, it's not disassembling the offense, but you have to look at the teams that are winning championships. All of these teams had prolific defenses.
Linebackers to get run.
Exactly. I mean, you look at the Patriots and the Seahawks this year. The Seahawks year before, you got Baltimore. You look at San Francisco in the Super Bowl. I mean, you have to be able to play defense in the National Football League to compete for championships. In 2009, when the Saints won the Super Bowl, they led the league in committing turnovers. I mean, and you saw this year that was a problem. They could not turn the ball over. So it's just a natural progression. You have to start to rebuild this defense. Clearly, there were holes in it last year. They couldn't stop anybody, and you can't always rely on your offense to score 35 or 40 points a game. So, like I said earlier, they've been very strategic about it. And look, they're going to go out. They're going to draft some pass rushers. They're probably going to bring in a cornerback, a middle linebacker. They're going to have some young guys. Now, they need to hit. And that's been the big problem. You look at the 2010 draft class, it's gone. Yeah. They don't have a single player on this team from that class. Yeah. And when you have draft classes like that are no longer around, obviously there's problems. That's why the change. Rick Ryprich is gone. Right. You have Jeff Ireland come in, and hopefully, there's going to be a big spotlight on these guys this year. They have to hit.
No, I would agree. Hayward is in New Orleans. Hayward, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey, thanks for taking the call. I enjoy the show.
Thank you very much.
A couple of questions. Since Lawson gone, who we gonna get to plug up that middle since Lawson gone? And if Kean Lewis and Browning is gonna be our starting cornerbacks, I always thought that Josh Hill was a better tight end. I think.
Thank you, Hayward. I think we lost Hayward, but. I think the corners are set. Now, right. the question is going to be, what are they going to do for the third corner? Will they wait for post-June 1st free agency? As what we mentioned a little bit earlier, teams they get younger, cheaper versions of some of the players they have. They let some of these veterans go, and maybe they get somebody in the open market. Or are they going to look to some of the guys on the roster? Let's take the cornerback position first.
Well, I think everyone's waiting for Stanley Jean-Baptiste to show some to show some potential.
Maybe waiting for the Easter Bunny by the time that comes.
It's hard to say, but the Saints haven't given up on him yet, and why would they? Because he's not getting paid anything. They drafted him high, and they want to work on that. They knew he was going to be a project, and it was going to come along slow. And it is a little bit unfair in the very first year. A cornerback is one of the more complicated positions on the defense to just call him a bust like that, people that called Meacham a bust in his first year, I already mentioned him in the show, kind of had to eat it 3 years later. So, and then hopefully they'll do better in the draft. I would say that the decision to get rid of Rick Ryprich and hire Jeff Ireland is basically Sean and Mickey agreeing with what you said, that they needed to, that's something that needs to change. Yeah. So, we'll see if it'll change, but they're trying.
Well, because again, first of all, Mickey's the contract guy. Okay, at the end of the day, he's signing off on whatever Sean wants. Right. Sean's the player personnel guy. He's making the decisions. But guys, he's got to lean on the scouts. I mean, he may get a chance on a Saturday afternoon to catch a couple games, and he may be able to break some film down in the offseason of players. But at the end of the day, he's relying on what the scouts are coming back and telling him when they get in that draft from, and when they're having these meetings on who's the best fit for his team.
Oh, absolutely, and they haven't done a good job, or somebody was overruling some of the scouts, and you've heard whispers of that. But look, they need another corner, and I think there are some very good ones available in this draft, and the Saints are set up very nicely to potentially get one of those guys at the end of the first round. Kevin Johnson out of Wake Forest, that guy can play. I think he may be better than Trey Waynes out of Michigan State. And they could take him with the 13th pick. So they have so many options. Some of these guys may fall to the second round. So I think that this team is in much better shape than it was, and I'm looking forward to this.
You know, the only thing I'm leery of this cornerback class is we watched Jalen Collins at LSU. Most draft boards have him, these gurus have him as the second-ranked cornerback in the NFL draft. Guys, I didn't see it at his time at LSU. Maybe he translates that to the NFL game and becomes a better corner, but that makes me kind of sit back and go, well, how strong is this cornerback position really if Jalen Collins is the number 2 guy on the board for most of these guys that are grading the draft?
Yeah, LSU, they struggled a little bit last year, so that's a good point. Yeah. But On the flip side is, we see a lot of instances where guys who aren't as good in college but have good measurables get in the right system in the pros and thrive, and vice versa.
Sure.
So
agreed.
I think Morris Claiborne, who I think we thought was fantastic at LSU,
That's right. I know.
hasn't really panned out yet
No, not at all.
in the NFL. So it goes both ways.
Could be another Stanley Jean-Baptiste.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
That's bad when he's already becoming
exactly
an adjective.
No doubt. Josh Hill, Peyton gushed over him. I mean, you guys were at the last press conference. I mean, he literally gushed over him, right?
Yeah, he did. He loves the kid, and I think you saw the way he was targeted quite a bit last year, and it's all about Drew Brees gaining confidence in a player with this offense, and Drew Brees seems to have a lot of confidence in Josh, and I think the team does too, and that's equally as important.
Larry is in Kenner. Larry, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey, Eric, thanks for taking the call, man. I was listening to your radio show. I watched this show, man. I follow you on Facebook. Good evening, fellas, by the way.
Thank you very much for doing it.
A couple of weeks ago, me and you was talking with Mike Detillier about Jimmy Graham playing hurt. And I said, what about him giving up some money to make some salary cap? 2 days later, boom, he's gone.
Yeah, he's out. He's out the door.
And then again, I just wanted to say, us Who Dat people got faith in Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis, and I smell a playoff in the Super Bowl this year. Good evening. I'll be listening to your show tomorrow.
Larry, thanks for the phone call. Appreciate you tuning in for sure. To Deborah in Gentilly. Deborah, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Deborah.
Hi.
Welcome to the show. Question for our panelist?
Yes, I'm glad you are able to take my call.
Thank you.
I have a comment about number 89, Josh Hill. And I'm looking at him last year. I remember how well he played. To me, he played better than Jimmy Graham did. I know Jimmy was hurt, but to me, he played better, number 89. And I'm looking for him to break out this season. And also, too, I'm looking at, I was listening to all the comments that was mentioned about, about the draft and everything.
Yes.
But I think like we played in 2009, if we get the team together, and I do trust the coach and everything, Sean Payton, and Drew Brees don't throw too many interceptions, I think we'll have a team like we had in 2009. What do you think?
Thank you for the phone call. From your mouth to God's ears. I can tell you that right now. That's for sure. Guys, I like Josh Hill. I mean, I think he's got potential. He's a much cheaper version than Jimmy Graham right now. And, I had this discussion with several reporters that have covered this team for a long time. And, guys, if you remember when Peyton got here, he got players that were basically told they couldn't play anymore. You got the Shanleys, you got the Vegetas, you got a lot of guys that were, basically just told, you know what, you can't make our team. And all of a sudden, these guys came in with chips on their shoulders. And they were kind of the nucleus of this team really making that move from 06 to 09 on that Super Bowl. I got to believe Sean Payton, in the back of his mind, realizes that as well and might go out and get some guys with maybe some chips on their shoulder. Look at Brandon Browner. He's got a little chip on his shoulder right now as well.
Look at all the guys they brought in. They all have been kind of undervalued at times. Browner was kicked around. I mean, went to the CFL, went to, here and there, and made it back to the league, and now is arguably one of the best cornerbacks in the league. And all of these guys that they brought in really do have that. They have something to prove. They have championship pedigree. They have the experience as leaders. And last year we heard so much in the locker room, oh, we don't need fiery leaders. We just have guys that lead by example. And I always kind of looked at that and I was like, no, you've got to have the guys to fire up. Yes. And you see now they've brought in a few of those guys. And I think it'll be, I'm very interested to see kind of how the locker room shapes up this year. I think it'll be a vastly different atmosphere in there.
Brett, you were in that locker room.
Yeah.
You saw those guys firsthand on what they brought to the team from the Haslett era to when Peyton took over.
Yeah, and actually I was going to say John Vilma even fits into what you were talking about because when he was unloaded by the Jets, he
couldn't play anymore.
Right, yeah, and that system also didn't work for him. He wasn't an ideal 3-4 type of fit.
Yes.
But so they had a lot of and the thing is, you got to kind of have a critical mass of those types of players just to drive the collective work ethic throughout the year and make, the few players who may feel a little more entitled because of their talent level and because of the relative easy path to the league. Make them feel like they're on notice every day, you know, that someone's gunning for them.
Right.
And sometimes that's the problem, is that you have guys who have enjoyed a little maybe early success, have been told how good they were and don't feel like anybody's gunning for them, and it just maybe it doesn't erode their talent so much, but it maybe just undermines their edge. And in pro football, I mean, you need every edge.
That's for sure, no doubt.
So.
And I'm looking to again see these type of players on this roster, because that to me was the biggest difference in those Saints teams to the Saints team we're seeing now, to even the Saints teams that we saw during the Haslett era. Guys that were told, you know, you can't play in this league anymore, and then all of a sudden they come here and guys that some names you never even heard of. And they were playing really well, and a lot of those guys really were huge parts of the Super Bowl winning team.
Yeah, and we haven't mentioned Delvin Breaux when we were talking about cornerbacks before.
Right.
That's
What
right.
are your thoughts?
You know, I think it's a long shot. But you know, Michael Lewis was a long shot and became an All-Pro a few years later. So I think the odds are statistically against him, but you can always have hope. And I think in this case, it's kind of calculated hope, because his initial path was it wasn't that he wasn't big enough or didn't have the talent. I mean, he had the talent to get recruited by LSU. It's just that he had injury problems.
Yes.
And he persevered and went from arena football to CFL. And
you know, but he almost, with the exception of the broken neck, I mean, he's got Brandon Browner's story pretty much. I mean, going to the CFL, becoming an All-Pro there, coming back.
He might be the slot guy.
I mean, exactly. Yeah.
The Saints would love to see it, because if you look on that salary cap, he's not a guy making a lot of money right now. And believe me, if they could go to minicamp and come out of minicamp feeling comfortable with this guy, it's another position they can fill down the line here, another position of need. Toby is in Gretna. Toby, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Yeah, when Rodrigo Shields was on the show earlier this year, he kind of alluded that Junior Gillette might have been the snitch on Bountygate. I'd like to get your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thanks. Guys, any thoughts about that? About Junior Gillette being involved in Bountygate in any form or fashion? Being a mole, so to speak?
Yeah, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that. I don't recall him being a prominent figure in the investigation. So anything's possible, but I'm not aware of that. So I wouldn't want to
Junior's problems with this team right now are strictly twofold. A, given so much opportunity and last year to be a leader on this team and falling flat on his face, and then the off-the-field situation. There's some buyer's remorse on the contract, because they expected him to be a dual-type player, and he proved out this year that he's really a situational pass rusher. But, you know, I think they would even live with the situational pass rusher if they didn't have the off-the-field issues with Junior right now. And that's why I said a few weeks ago, you know, he better thank God that he has that guaranteed money and that roster bonus. Otherwise, he'd be gone right now. He wouldn't be on this team. So he gets a reprieve here and a chance to be able to ultimately have a second chance at staying with this club, and having a second chance ultimately at maybe staying in the league as well. 556-9696. Let's go to Harris. Harris, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey, Eric, thanks for taking my call, and good afternoon to you and your guests. The question that I have is, do you all see Shontavious Jones or Brandon Colbert stepping up and being a prominent member in this offense in the upcoming year?
Harris, thank you for the phone call. Guys?
Yeah, I mean, the Shontavious Jones, is that what he said?
Yeah, and Brandon Coleman, yes.
I do. I think they're going to get a chance to prove themselves in camp, but and develop some trust with Drew Brees. You saw him last training camp really develop that with Nick Toon before he got hurt, and that was kind of stopped when Drew Brees had to sit out with the oblique for a few weeks. But yeah, I think these guys are extremely athletic. They're long, they're big, they can go up high and get the ball. They have a great catch radius, and actually run pretty good routes. So I'm excited to see their development over the summer and see how it plays out during camp.
Fred, anything you can add?
I think they've got a shot, you know. I don't know, a prominent role, maybe a regular role, but sometimes a regular role is all you need, you know. Just a few key targets per game to take a little pressure off Marcus Colston and some of the other targets that may be out there. So Brandon Cooks.
Right. And we've also often heard that, again, the offense is interchangeable in terms of the wide receiver position. Yeah. You can literally, if someone understands the system, knows their responsibilities, is a disciplined receiver, they can work in this system. And we've seen it over and over. We've seen underachievers. Seen Lance Moore's another guy, that came in as an underachiever and has done really well. I want to ask one more question about the Saints, and I want to move to the Pelicans, and hopefully we can get to LSU basketball as well. All right, we've heard the Drew Brees conversation over and over again. That can now be put to rest. They're sticking with Brees. They're building this team now to try to take advantage of maybe the last 3 or 4 years of Brees' career. Guys, your thoughts on the direction this team is going in terms of Drew Brees? Does Drew Brees still have something left in the tank for this team? And if a player like Marcus Mariota is available at 13, because I don't think they're moving up to get a quarterback, but if he's available at 13, do they take a shot at him?
I think it's unlikely right now because the more likely scenario is that they extend Drew Brees in order to get some cap relief in the next couple years. Drew was tied for the league lead in passing this year. He did throw a lot of interceptions, but Sean always says how much harder the quarterback's job gets when receivers' routes aren't precise,
right?
When they get knocked off the route, or when the line breaks down, especially in the middle. And he's trying to address those areas because I think he believes that Drew is still healthy and still accurate.
Yeah, I don't see it. They're not even looking at Marcus Mariota from what I've been told, and if he is available, they're not taking him. It was never an option. They're building around Drew Brees. That's the plan. That's the plan going forward. And when a guy throws for 4,952 yards last year, you don't move on from him. He's got plenty of great football left in him, and I thought it was absurd, all the rumors.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I actually said exactly what Peyton said and Loomis said. It was just a situation where ultimately somebody throws something out there. In today's social media world, it just sticks. It just ran like wildfire. The scenario I believe is going to happen is simply this. Brees, they'll see what he's got in the tank this year by beefing up the offensive line and the defense. If they still believe, as I believe, that again, he'll still be a top-notch quarterback, they're going to sign him to an extension, and they're going to alleviate that cap hit for next year and make it a little more palatable over the next 3 or 4 years for Drew Brees. Back to the phone lines we go. Vernon is in Mandeville. Vernon, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Vernon.
Yeah, how you doing, man?
Welcome to the show.
Hey, fine. I'd like to make a comment on the Pelicans and the LSU basketball team.
Please.
Look, if you notice the last games, the last 5 losses that LSU basketball is they lost the game in the last few minutes. Also with the Pelicans, they lose games, almost all their games in the last 2 or 3 minutes. To me, they need a coaching change on both of these teams because they need a coach that fires them up and can make changes. And they're too passive with their players. Just like LSU, this guy's going to the pros. They underachieved as far as I'm concerned. They didn't want to get hurt because they knew they were going to. And the coach did not let them play to their full potential. And he didn't make changes that he should have won a lot of those ball games.
Thank you for the phone call. We'll address both those issues. Let's take the Pelicans first. Boy, they've been snake-bitten under Monty Williams. There's no doubt about that. When you look at the injuries that have piled up over the last few years, but as I've said on this program, my radio show, injuries are no longer an excuse in this situation. You got to look at the body of work, and then you got to be able to determine whether Monty Williams is a guy that could take them to the next level. Brett, I'll take you first. Is Monty Williams that guy?
I'm not sure. I wouldn't definitively say yes. They have had some disappointing finishes, although I would say, unlike LSU, the Pelicans haven't necessarily blown a lot of big leads down the stretch. They just, they've been in close games down the stretch where all of a sudden they couldn't score, and it would slip away. But they also have won some close games down the stretch, and I think it's only fair to point out some of the games where they've had some heroic finishes, whether it's Tyreek Evans or Anthony Davis hitting a 3 in Oklahoma City, things like that. And they have been relatively competitive this year with a lot of injuries, especially to the premier point guard who's like the quarterback of the offense. I mean, I don't know if Drew Holiday is damaged goods or not. I mean, it's a really mysterious injury he's had now with stress fracture 2 years.
2 years in a row.
But Monty has another year left in his contract, and I just think that it's palatable probably for the Saints/Pelicans top brass to say, well, we like him. He's been competitive. We haven't seen him with a healthy roster yet, and he has a year left. So instead of cutting him loose early and going with an unknown, we'll stick with the known on a short leash. He's got 1 year left. Now, if his contract was ending this year, I don't know if they'd extend him.
Right.
But my gut feeling is they'll at least let him get into next season. Maybe they'll fire him mid-season if things aren't going well. LSU, Johnny Jones is a really good recruiter.
Right.
And we're going to see how good next year. And recruiting is like 75% of the battle in college basketball.
Right.
Now, they lost Eric Musselman,
Yes.
right? And I think the answer for LSU is really for Johnny Jones to get a great assistant coach.
I agree with you. Like Dale Brown did.
Yeah.
Dale Brown always had a great X and O guy sitting next to him that again was a great bench coach that could help him during the games when things were rolling. I think Johnny Jones has got to take a page from his mentor's book and do the exact same thing. And I thought Musselman was that guy this year. He got the job at Nevada. He's got to find another one of those guys. Yeah. Lyons, you have the floor.
Yeah, with Monty, you know, earlier this year I would have said yes, it's time to move on from him. But I've really been impressed with the way he's held this team together this year. And you saw they won 5 games in a row. Got back into this playoff race, and yeah, they've had some troubles again down the stretch. But again, you're dealing with injuries, and I don't think that's his fault. And these guys have the progression that you've seen out of Anthony Davis and the moves they've made to bring in guys like Norris Cole and Cunningham and Pondexter. The way he's kind of brought them into this team and been able to assimilate them to what the Pelicans do, I think has been fantastic, and I really like what he's done, and I'm excited to see, you know, what he can possibly do next year.
I think it's going to come down to season ticket renewals, though, guys. I really do. I mean, at the end of the day, I think they're going to take a hard look at it. You know, when you kind of poll the fan base on social media, very, very much against Monty coming back. So, you know, maybe again your scenario, having 1 more year on the contract, not wanting to eat that contract, has a lot to do with it. But I think they're going to put their finger in the air and try to figure out what's going to happen with season ticket renewals.
And Anthony Davis appears to really like Monty Williams. Now, Anthony Davis is wise beyond his years when he talks to the media. And one thing I've noticed in covering pro sports especially, is that when guys talk about themselves, especially when they criticize themselves, you can usually believe that that's genuine. When they talk about their coaches and teammates, it's hard to know if they're saying what's politically correct or not. But it appears that he gets along really well with Monty Williams, and I think that Davis will have to be consulted because next year is the last year of his contract. So that could have a lot to do with the decision.
Yeah, and I got to believe that they're going to at least approach him this summer to try to get an extension done before they get into that last year of that deal. There's no doubt. Lyons, your thoughts on Johnny Jones? I got less than a minute left.
Yeah, no, I agree with you about bringing in an X's and O kind of guy on the bench like Dale Brown does. We've talked about that before when we were just sitting here. And yeah, next year they've got a great recruiting class coming in. Ben Simmons, the #1 player in the country. This guy Antonio Blankley, 6'4" shooting guard from Florida. He's a 5-star kid, so they've got some talent. Craig Victor coming in. Obviously, they lose Mickey and Martin.
At least Martin.
Or excuse me, yeah, maybe Mickey. Definitely Martin. But you're going to see if he's able to do like Calipari and Krzyzewski and these guys and bring these freshmen in who are uber talented and maybe 1-year guys and get them to kind of play with everybody else.
Yeah, but they've got to keep the nucleus of this roster here till they're seniors. To me, in the NCAA, as you get into the tournament, especially guards, you need veteran guards on your team. That's going to be one of the keys going forward. And you know, want to say again, Jordan Mickey, in an article that was written this week in which the author of the article spoke to his father, Jordan Mickey not only had a shoulder injury, but both ankles were injured. So this is a guy that was playing hurt down the stretch, one of the reasons why you saw him struggle. Brett Martel, the Associated Press, man, thanks for being with us, playing hurt tonight. Really appreciate it. Lyons, Yellin of WWL TV, thanks for being on our panel as well. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night at 10 p.m. right here on WLAE TV. Also on Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette markets, 9 p.m. each and every Friday night. You can catch me on the radio, 9:90 a.m. WGSO, 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. on the weekdays. Also, You can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. And if you missed any of the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports, check those out at ericasher.com as well. Again, special thanks to our guests, Lyons, Yellin, and also Brett Martel. Also the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Donovan Joseph, Kenny Juneau, and also Philip Williamson, along with my director, William Hill. New Orleans, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here next Thursday night for Inside New Orleans Sports. Good evening.